Well, welcome back, folks. It feels like ages since we concluded video number 3 with this fine piece of equipment, and I just wanted to quickly update you on some of the things that have happened in the meantime. The big one is that this project is now live, so please visit AuthentiKit.org, where not only can you download all the files that you need for this project, but we've now got a Discord server running. There's guys on that server who have 3D printers offering to print parts for people at very reasonable prices. So if you don't have a printer, there's somebody on there who can probably help you. And we also have a supplier who's making up all-in-one kits of the components that you need and selling them for less, quite a bit less, than it would cost you to buy them. I also want to thank my small team of DCS and X-Plane guys who have been making beta test builds of this stick over the last month or so. A few have now finished the build and I've been getting some feedback from them. In short, they like it a lot, which I'm hugely relieved about, as I didn't want this just to look the part. I wanted it to feel the part as well. Now, if you really want to know how it feels, I recommend you check out Steve Walton, YouTube's VR flight sim guy. There's a link in the description. I sent him a stick, a fully assembled stick, last week, and he's already released a review. And to be honest, I was hoping for a kind of, you know, this is pretty good, especially considering it's kind of homemade. Instead, I got...
Many Spitfire pilots have said, when you fly this aircraft, it's like you put it on, like you're wearing it. And I feel like I'm getting close to that experience using an actual replica of this stick. It feels fantastic, guys.
Steve, for the record, thank you, honestly. But now we need to build a fully working flight stick. This is what we're going to do in this video. First, I need to go backwards a bit, I'm afraid, before I can go forwards, because the assembly has changed a little bit towards the end of the last video. It's improved it. It's a better design, thanks to the beta testers. Secondly, we're going to put the base and the socket onto the end here. Then we're going to build our universal hub, which this plugs into. Then we'll fit it to the rig, plug it into Windows, quick calibration, and go fly. So let's get started and roll back to this point. We've got no pitch lever this time. We've just got these wires hanging out to the side. That was group A with the black and the red, and then group B here. One small difference. Remember, I was concerned about these wires sliding through underneath this little bridge. Well, I've added a small cable tie, so they can't slide through anymore. Now let's talk about the pitch lever. Here's the pitch lever, looks very similar. Here's the plug, also looks very similar. The difference is that this plug now screws into the back of this pitch lever, like that. Now when you print it, you might find that you've got a little bit of spread on the filament there, and it sort of doesn't go in very easily. So before we assemble this, just make sure it does go in easily. And there's a little tool which I've built for you that will just help get that tightened in tightly. Now when it is in, it should be really quite snug there. There shouldn't be any of the thread. In fact, there's a good way of showing it. You can see there's no gap between that flattened side, or barely any gap between that flattened side and the base. If you're not getting that, then try and sort of screw it in here. And if you're having some trouble there, you know, maybe even get a wrench on it or something. Just gently push past any of the stoppage, because you need that to go in quite easily later on. Now let's talk about the wires. Last time we marked out about 6 centimeters here. This time we're going to mark out 9 centimeters. It's going to serve a slightly different purpose. So let's put the 9 on there. I need to remember that one. And the same with the other bunch. Okay, it's assembly time like before. We have group A and group B, and we're going to be threading the group B wires on the right hand side, so it's A, B, and let's start with the B wires. And there is an order, same as before, which is from the left, green, yellow, blue, white. So let's thread that through now. This was always quite an easy one compared to the others. They go in pretty easily. This one goes in nice and easily as well. Okay, there they are. Now the bearing. Thread them through here. Bearing just slots into its case. Now the pitch plug that way round. There we go, and I've kept the order. I've still avoided twisting any of the wires. Now it's time to thread the wires through the pitch lever. So we'll start again with group B. If you hold the pitch lever with the plinth underneath, group A will go down the short side, group B will go down the long side. So let's start with group B. Okay, there's group B. We thread that into the slots on the back. Now this is where the 9 centimeter mark is important. We're going to pull this all the way through to the 9 centimeter mark and no more. Okay, I think I've got that right. Now, keeping the same order, we're going to thread the green, yellow, blue, white through this channel to pop out of that cavity. Now you won't get all 4 in at once, so I would suggest putting 2 in. Okay, there's 2. And then the trick I've mentioned before, which is to put the 4th one in, which is the white one. And use the friction of the other 2 to drag that through. And then thread the blue one between number 2 and number 4 and let the friction drag that through. Okay, so there we go. Done. Rinse and repeat. Now if you aren't quite sure about these marks and it's starting to look a bit messy, err on the generous side. It's easier to just coat with a little bit of slack cable inside the body here than to have this cable too short. Okay guys, it's wires down the side again. Same as before. Let me say something about this part of the build. This is proven one of the fiddliest ones during the beta testing. I've managed to thread these through fairly well each time, and some of the guys have during the testing, but a couple of the guys really just couldn't get these wires down here very easily, and they ended up, just to get the job done, they split that. Make sure you're using this cable. Check the parts list. It's 26 AWG. It's got a silicon wrap. It's about 1.5 millimeter diameter. If you're not using this cable, yeah, you could have some trouble. But what I am doing, I've got another version of this which I'm going to release in a week or so. I'm basically going to make this thing a little bit fatter and make the cavity wider. So that should make things easier for you. But if you've got the right wire, you should be able to manage now anyway. Now I clipped the video to save time, but I do assure you that went in pretty easily. It's the short side though, the longer side's a bit harder. Okay, nearly done. Yeah, this side is a little bit harder. I've got 3 of them through. I put the white and the blue through first, then the green, and then I've just threaded the yellow in the middle, and I'm just trying to push. Yep, there we go. There's the yellow coming through now. There we go. Nice and tidy. Yes, and no twists. Okay, with the new design, the other side of this pitch lever is one of our standard MkIX 6003s. So this actually looks pretty identical to the one which is inside the roll bearing. It is slightly different actually, and if you were to put 2 of these together, you'd find that the footprint of this is just a fraction bigger. And also the position of that magnet in relation to that D, that's slightly different as well. So you need to get the right one. You don't want that mixed up with that. And to help you, I've put a ring around the top of the D here. So the one with the ring is for the pitch, and the one without a ring is for the roll. So we assemble as usual. We need to know which is north. Okay, that's the north. Let's just carefully take that away. We know where the north is. We can see a dot here. So we just press that in place. Slide that through the bearing into the case. Now I've already put the wires on the back of this particular mag haul. It's the usual RBW, red, blue, white, with the same crimping mechanism, so you can check back to the video for the roll bearing to see how that was done. So now let's just assemble this, hold it down with the 20mm. Now the eagle-eyed amongst you might actually notice that the front of this case is slightly bigger than the back of this case. In the version that you've got with the downloads, they're the same, and this kind of should be the same, but I had this piece lying around and it fits. So there's our MagHaul 6003, and it will mount to the pitch lever. But before we do that, don't leave this one too late or you'll have to take it apart again. We need to fit the spring. So let's fit the spring. Let's put the dowel in there. Let's hang the spring on the end. Retainer, 10mm. Same as before. Okay, now carefully attach the MagHaul to the pitch lever. I say carefully just because we don't want to drag these wires out. If you've fitted those well, they should be pretty sound, but just be careful anyway. You can kind of see where the lip is for the D, so that goes on here. And now we fit a 14mm screw in there. Now here's a thing that I've added to the download list. We've got quite a few screws here, and in particular the 6 and the 8s, they're pretty similar in size, so I've made this as a quick way, because we don't want any bigger than a 14mm. That would damage the MagHaul. So I think this is a 14mm, and you can see that it perfectly fits there. If I pushed it under the 10, it's too big. So that's a useful thing. So let's put the 14mm in here, and we can confidently tighten that up strongly. Now it's time to pull that pitch peg up towards the thread, and now we can tighten up this pitch peg with our pitch peg lever. Okay, now we can slide the bearing back to the pitch peg. This takes a little bit of time. You just have to do this carefully because there's a bit of friction in the slots here, but it will slide back. It's taking a little bit of time, folks, and actually I said I was going to redesign this and make that cavity wider. I'm actually going to modify the design of this so there's a bit less friction for sliding these wires back. Okay, well this basically puts us where we were at the end of the last video, except we now have a much improved pitch lever. There's a lot less room for give there, which was the issue I had last time. So now we carefully slot the pitch lever into its case, being careful not to drag any of these wires here off the MagHaul. And we go for that bottom lug slotting into the channel, which is at the bottom of the body there. You kind of know when this is in because you can rock the pitch lever on that bottom lug sitting in its cavity. And that's the point you can get a screw in at the bottom on both sides. Then it's really the same as before. Part threaded bolt acts as the bearing for the spring at this end, and thread the red, blue, white through, connect it up. So I'm just going to skip this and take you to where we were at the end of last time. Okay, so here we are with our flight stick. Kind of where we were at the end of the last video, but with a much better pitch lever. Things get a lot quicker now, and we're really quite close, but let me just say a couple of things. One, for this side, you really need to be careful. Those are the 8mm. Any bigger than that, you'll damage the MagHaul, which is why this tool's quite useful. 8mm, quite short really, and you can see that is a correct 8mm. That's one thing. Second thing, these tiny little ferrules are, they're not all created equal. This is a good one. It's very cleanly cut. I mean, no doubt it's a long tube and they just kind of chop little pieces off. Nice and clean. So when you're threading some wire through there, that's fine, goes great. But depending on where you get them from, I've got another one here which is really quite scrappy. You see that rough sort of cut? If you get some like that, I mean, they're not expensive, these things. Just get some new ones. Find a different supplier. Because that just makes it so much harder to thread the wire through. It catches on that little burr at the edge there. Okay, let's get back to building this stick. Here's the base box. We're going to fit that. It fits this way round. The wires come out of the RJ socket, which is up here. And we fit this plinth to that base with 10mm screws. So just be careful not to catch these wires here, and then just get these 10mm threaded on. Okay, that's good. Now the dovetail quick release mount. That goes this way round with the open end at the bottom. 8mm screws for this. Now it is just time for the RJ45. That's the name for this basic Ethernet or network socket. I researched so many designs of this, and although they all work and there are a lot of different types, one thing's been crucial throughout this project, and it's why this thing's taken 2 years, and that is that when you have finished wiring all this up and connecting everything up and you plug it into your PC, you just want it to work. You do not want to have to disassemble it and diagnose where some kind of connection hasn't gone right. So that's how I ended up with this design. It doesn't need any tools, and when I've connected the wires in, I just find better than any of the others, it works. So this is how you wire it up. You need to remember the color order again. It was red, black, blue, white, so that must be this set here. So this is how you wire it up. You simply put the wire into the channel, so it just sits in there kind of snugly. Don't push it too far, but make sure it goes past the teeth, and the teeth are staggered, so you can see they're slightly different there. Just put it in like that and then click the lid down, and that will crush the wire through the teeth and make a good connection. Simple as that. So red, black. Double check these, by the way. I have made mistakes rushing this and it's not good. So red, black. Okay, so there they are. Red, black, blue, white from one group, green, yellow, blue, white from another group. Now here's a warning. You see there are numbers. Numbers on the top there. They don't actually go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They go 1, 2, 5, 4, 8, 7, 3, 6. And there are different versions of this socket, and those numbers can change sometimes. So what I would suggest is find a supplier of one of them and use the same socket every time. Okay, now we simply pop that socket into the hole, and it goes. Now you could cut these wires a bit short, but I kind of like to leave the extra length there just in case you have to disassemble something. It just seems like tempting fate to burn your bridges at this stage. So tuck these wires out of the way and then slide the lid on. Just make sure you're not snagging any wires. Now I have some nice black screws to go in the top here. And that, folks, is an AuthentiKit Spitfire Mark 9 fighter stick complete. So this is the universal hub. We're going to use one socket today, but there's actually room for 10. So we'll have the stick in this socket here. Then there's room for more items which I'm bringing out over the next few months. The throttle quadrant, the trim wheel, gear and flaps. And I think the flaps is likely to double up with a helicopter collective. And there's 5 more on the other side which I'll talk about in a later video. So let's fit the circuit board. This is a Leo Bodner BU0836A. There are other circuit boards around, and some of them are even slightly cheaper. But I like this one a lot. Firstly, it requires no programming. You just plug it in with a USB and Windows immediately recognizes it as a joystick controller. Secondly, in my experience, it's pretty bulletproof. I've miswired it a few times and I've never damaged one, even though I have burned out a couple of hall sensors along the way. And thirdly, like everything else, there are no electronic skills needed here. There's no soldering, it's just plug in. So we just have this little retaining clip that will hold it in place, and a 6mm screw, and there's the circuit board in place. Now let's wire up the RJ45. This is the same socket as before, and we have the numbers in the same order. And you need 10 DuPont ended wires. That's what these are. They just plug onto those pins there. Now I found that these wires often come in bundles of 40, which are 10 different colours, which is nice, and then groups of 4, which is perfect. They're often about 20 centimeters long. That's a female plug on one end, and you can get a male or a female on the other, so snip one end off because we're just going to have bare wire on the other ends. Make sure that these are at least 26 AWG thickness, because that's what we'll need for them to clip reliably into these channels. Let's wire up this RJ45 now. It's the same colours as before, but with a slight difference. We have the red, black, blue, white, green, yellow, but because we have more colours with these DuPont cables, the second blue is a purple and the second white is a grey. One other small change is that we won't use that red at the moment. We will use a little piece of the silicon wire, and you'll see why in a second. So let's wire this up in the same way we did before. So there we have the RJ45 with all the wires in. I've stripped off some of the silicon off the end of this red because that red is going to split out now into 3 reds, in the same way that we had 3 reds in the stick merge into one. And those 3 reds will be a red, a brown and an orange. Let's start by putting the RJ45 into its socket. Okay. And we're going to use this peg here as a place to join those 3 wires. So it's another one of these flange head screws. Now we need to strip some wire off these, and I found the easiest way for this is one of these cheap wire strippers. They're quite thin wires, and I find this works better than my more expensive one. You put the wire through the smallest hole, grip it tightly, and just give this cable a little twist and pull it off like that. Now let's twist all these reds together and loop them round this peg. Okay, check that that's nice and secure. And now we simply plug them in. Now, as the picture shows here, we're going to be using some of these particular pins. I'll explain what is happening on this circuit board. The rows of 3 are for axes. So those are the analog pitch, roll kind of things here. There's 2 pins here. Don't use those, not in my configuration of this particular device. We don't need to use them. And then the pins at the top are actually individual. Each one of them acts as a button, although you can combine 2 of them for rotary devices like a trim wheel. We're only going to use one of them today, number 1 of the column side there. It says columns and rows, which will be the fire button. So I'm just going to plug these in now, as you can see in the picture. Okay, that's all the axes in. It's good just to check that you've got those rows of 3 lined up. And then we just put the fire button in. So remember, we skip that row immediately above the top axis and it goes in the number 1 slot there. That's the wiring done. And here's a nice lid to hold everything down. Now, I know I said I was going to show you the rig or mounting system, but this video is getting quite long. So this is just a quick intro, and video number 5 will focus more on the rig. This bracket may look familiar to you. It's a Visa mount, and it's the standard mounting system for televisions and monitors. Now, monitor stands that clamp to your desk, they're commodity items, so they're pretty cheap compared to specialist mounts, and that's what we're using. We fix this quick release bracket to the Visa. I'll just put the screws in that now. There we go. We have some nuts on the back of these. It's about the only time we're using any nuts with these screws. And then it's a case of tilting this to 45 degrees and there we go. And then the flight stick just slots on like that. And it comes off just as quickly, so I can swap it in 30 seconds for my DR400 flight stick, which I've got lying around here somewhere. Now the moment of truth. I have this short network cable, which is just a little easier to show in this video. Always connect up the network cable first before you plug in the USB. Then I recommend you launch the Windows controller device. just type in Joy into Windows and launch USB game controllers. I'm about to plug in the USB, and I'm fairly quickly going to check in the game controllers device that Windows is recognizing this stick, and if it doesn't look right, I'm going to pull out the USB pretty sharpish, and then I'll check my wires. Because if I leave it plugged in for a few minutes and I've miswired a whole sensor, I could burn it out. Now, actually, the only time I've done that is when I had the black and the red the wrong way around in the RJ45, so you might want to check that first. So here we go. Okay, it's detected, and let's have a look. Fantastic. We can see a slider at the top. We've got some roll movement, and we have some pitch movement. And do we have a fire button? Yes, number 1, flashing. Now, if you don't see that slider at the top in any position, or you don't see the cross moving around a little bit, then pull out the USB. Now, it's quite possible that when you first plug it in, you'll see the cross sort of down at the bottom, or just generally in some funny position, because we need to now run calibrate, and I've kind of done this before, so this particular joystick control is detected by Windows and it recognizes it. But what we need to do is hit Settings, Calibrate, Next, leave things as they are, hit Next again, and I like to display raw data. Now all we need to do is go full deflection, and Windows will know what the range is and know where the middle is. And then full deflection on here. There we go, and put it down again, and now hit Next, Next again, and then go full deflection on the slider, and hit Next, and finish. And now the slider goes all the way, and we've got nicely calibrated joystick. Let me just give you some troubleshooting advice here if you don't get things working as I just did. Firstly, check the cables in the RJ45 are in the right order. Now if that's right, the second most likely thing is that one of your wires is not making contact with the teeth inside of this RJ45. So another way you can wire them, it's probably not the silicon ones, by the way, because the silicon breaks through quite easily and the teeth contact that, but these DuPont wires have got a harder cable wrapper on them. So one thing you can do, and in fact I do this quite a lot, is instead of just putting the plastic in and letting the teeth break through the plastic, strip the wire and then put the stripped wire just over the teeth, and that is a guaranteed way of making contact. Just be careful not to strip off too much wire, because I don't know if you can see closely, but these teeth, a little piece of them protrudes into the adjacent channel, and if you just had like a lot of stray wire there and they were fuzzy and sort of sticking out in all places, there's a chance that this wire will kind of short across and make contact with the adjacent channel. So if you keep that piece really short so that it just goes over the teeth and then click it down like that, then you get a very good contact and you won't risk going across channels. Finally, I guess you need to disassemble and check the mag holes if that hasn't fixed it. If you've crimped them well though, they should be safe, and in fact I've never had that be the cause of the problem. Folks, we are done here. You've got yourself a working Spitfire Mark 9 fighter stick. Enjoy. I'm going to do one more video about the rig, and just to whet your appetite, this is the prototype of my throttle quadrant and trim wheel. This is a nice action on the trim wheel. I need a prop. I've only got mixture and throttle at the moment, and a little bit of improving in various places. But that's coming next.